There's a number of myths and misconceptions about immigrants, and they are specifically prevalent in North America, and Canada is no exception. A country with an aggressive immigration policy, welcoming hundreds of thousands of immigrants every year.
In this video, we want to discuss 5 most common beliefs about immigrants, and we will look for evidence on whether or not they're actually true.
Let's get started. Immigrants take jobs away from Canadians.
So, do immigrants really take jobs away from Canadians? According to Canada.ca website, this is the reason for immigration policy. The strength of Canada's economy is measured in part by the number of people working, known as labor force, and paying taxes to fund our public services, such as healthcare. In other words, the more people you have in the workforce, the stronger the economy, and more taxes paid to fund all the good things we like subsidized healthcare, all sorts of tax credits and benefit programs. And having enough workforce is where Canada struggles a lot. It has a big amount of aging populations that's not participated in the labor force. They are in fact a burden to the government because statistically they actually take the most out of Canadian benefit system like healthcare, pension plans and social services. At the same time, Canada's fertility rates are declining, being at the lowest point known in the history, at 1.4 births per woman. This number is among the lowest across many developed countries. The healthy birth rate target for Canada is 2.1. With Canada's great ambitions of being a world-leading economy and having the second largest territory in the world, Canada must grow much faster, and it needs a lot more people than the 39 million it has. I'm pretty sure you've heard about comparison that the population of Canada is the same as just one state of California in the United States. So what do we have? Canadians are not making enough babies, and many people are getting old. So who's gonna work across this big and fruitful land? Immigrants is the answer. Immigrants are meant to fill labor shortages in specific sectors. Currently, there is a strong shortage of healthcare, construction and manufacturing workers across the country. For instance, bringing more immigrants to fill in those construction and manufacturing jobs will help build more homes faster and might improve our housing crisis situation. But wait a minute, we will touch on this topic next. Immigrants also help create more jobs. According to Stats Canada, 33% of all businesses and half of the technology businesses are started by immigrants in Canada. And if you're not yet convinced by these arguments, we will swing the opposite way. Talk to your Uber driver next time you're getting a ride and ask them about their PhD from their home country and how it helped them to take jobs away from Canadians. The grass isn't always greener on the Canadian side for immigrants. Lastly, whether we immigrants like it or not, the immigrant labor force is cheap. Immigrants are willing to do the kind of jobs that Canadians simply don't want to do, and they're willing to take a lower paycheck to do that at start. It's a win for employers, it's a win for the economy, and in many cases temporary win for immigrants as well, before they gain experience and network to launch into something bigger and better. All in all, dear Canadian fellows, nobody is taking jobs away. In fact, some of us are creating jobs for you, or doing the jobs that you would never even want to do in the first place. Immigrants coming to Canada go through the stress of immigration. They face learning how all the systems work from scratch here, including job search strategies, the struggle being away from their friends and relatives. They have foreign education and they need to build network in the new country. And English is their second or even third language. So if you're worried that on top of all that stress, immigrants manage to take your jobs away from you, well, maybe it's probably time to take some upskilling courses to become more competitive in the job market. Speaking of being competitive in the job market, if you're a newcomer and you're looking for your first job in Canada, we recently launched a career deck, a service where we offer one-on-one career coaching services and help you build a resume to land your dream job in Canada. You can check the link below for more information.
The federal government is planning for 500,000 immigrants to the country each year.
Since the 1980s, Canada has welcomed more immigrants.
The supply of homes is not keeping up with our growing population.
Canada has a huge housing crisis, but it would be too quick to blame immigrants only for that. Let's dive deeper. The rental vacancy rate is at the historical minimum, and that's much lower than the 3% threshold typically considered healthy for a balanced real estate market. The rental and housing prices have shot up an incredible 30% since February 2021 and 80% since the lows in 2009. Renting, let alone buying a home in Canada, feels unachievable for the majority of Canadians. Yes, bringing 500,000 immigrants every year is definitely making the housing situation worse. The minimum the country can do is to speed up the construction of the new houses, but that's not easy. Canada currently has over 1 million job openings across almost all sectors, and unemployment rates are at historical minimums, floating around 5%. What this indicates is that there are simply not enough people filling up jobs that Canada needs to effectively function as a country. It's almost like a chicken and egg problem. To grow the economy, you need more labor force. More labor force needs more housing. And to build more housing, you need more labor force. This vicious cycle creates pressure on the market and leads to the housing crisis. But there are more layers to this problem. It doesn't help that Canada has a harsh climate and large land. To operate more effectively, most of the local economies are concentrated around large metropolitan areas, which leads to underdevelopment and underpopulation of rural areas in Canada. So the centralization of the Canadian economy is another layer to the housing crisis. According to StatsCan, the rural population of Canada is declining, and the average age of rural residents is increasing. It creates labor shortages, which makes it difficult to attract new businesses and residents. This leads to a lack of economic development in these areas, which in turn limits the availability of jobs and housing. When everybody flocks to the big city, of course, there are not going to be enough homes for everyone. Vast distances, lack of convenient public transport, car dependence and lack of infrastructure are also additional layers to the housing crisis in Canada. In the ideal world, people could be living further from downtowns and commuting easier if only they had such an opportunity. But there are still no high-speed trains connecting towns in Canada. To make things worse, there are conservative laws, strict zoning bylaws, and bureaucracy when it comes to construction in Canada. Planning and approvals take too much time. There is no incentive for builders to build affordable housing. There's also constant wars of landlords and tenants. Landlord-tenant bureaus work horribly slow and are overwhelmed with complaints. Landlords are not willing to control rent prices as interest rates and inflation are going up. All that while tenants are not willing to pay rent, which makes landlords step away from renting their properties at all in the future. So as you see, the system is deeply flawed. But of course, it's easier to blame everything on the immigrants first when our own government has no real interest in fixing the root causes of the problem. They probably expect that the newcomer immigrants will figure out how to solve all these problems. What do you think about all of this? Please share your thoughts in the comment section below.
Immigrants are a burden on social services. Interestingly, research shows that immigrants actually use fewer government benefits than Canadians. First, Canada has done a pretty good job protecting itself from newcomer social service abuse. For instance, as a newcomer, you certainly cannot get the biggest unemployment benefit, EI, employment insurance, because it requires you to have actually worked for a certain period and contributed to EI plan through your employer before you can qualify for that. Secondly, you undergo a rigorous health examination as part of your immigration process. You're tested for many critical and transmissible diseases. The fact is that all immigrants coming to Canada are likely much more healthier than Canadians. So that reduces the likelihood that immigrants will become a burden to the Canadian medical system, at least in the short term. To add to that, the Canadian immigration system is designed to prioritize younger and more educated individuals to maximize the working and tax-paying life and delay any inevitable benefits old people use. Yes, immigrants do get to benefit from Canadian child benefit as soon as they land in Canada. But over the years, when those children grow up, they actually make up for it. Look at this report right here. It shows that immigrants contribute more in taxes than they receive in benefits. Looking at the Young Adult StatsCan report for people aged 18 to 30, the average use of social assistance and employment insurance is lower among immigrants. Not a lot, but still. It's an incredible statistic to look at when we talk about immigrants being a burden to the economy. Another report from a few years ago shows that immigrants are making 12% more in income than Canadian average. That's because Canada invites highly educated and experienced immigrants who are theoretically able to hit the ground running and require minimal training. All that while only 57% of the Canadian population holds a college-university credential. All in all, while there will always be people taking advantage of the system, in aggregate, immigrants are contributing more to the economy in the form of tax paid, labor force and jobs created than they take in terms of social and employment benefits.
Immigrants are more prone to crime. That's a spicy one. In fact, studies show that immigrants are no more likely to commit crimes than people born in Canada. Of course, we should note that Canada is a culture pot of different cultures, beliefs and religions. So when you put all of those different people together, something explosive is bound to happen sooner or later. But a work disagreement or a minor conflict due to cultural differences is different from an actual crime. In order to find out whether immigrants conduct more crime than Canadians, we looked at a study published by Maria Jung, an associate professor of criminology at Toronto Metropolitan University. The first thing we will point out is that apparently criminal justice statistics do not record the immigrant status of offenders, and it is generally not known whether the offenders are immigrants or not. At the same time, the study covers a few very important arguments. And to begin, we will mention that having a criminal offense on your record as a permanent resident may make you lose your residency status as a whole, and in worst cases you may get deported, and you're definitely guaranteed to delay your citizenship until you get a record of clearance, which could take up to 10 years. In this case, immigrants have a lot to lose when committing a crime. On an individual level, the study shows that immigrant youth have stronger family ties, higher levels of commitment to education, and therefore less likely to commit youth crimes. That is because they're given up on their comfortable life in search of better opportunities, and they're just not going to waste it on committing crimes. On the macro level, a longer-term study on crime levels correlation to immigration has shown no significant relationship between immigration and crime. And a few studies have even indicated a positive impact of immigration on crime levels, since immigrants are likely to move to lower-income neighborhoods. And with that, they end up stimulating the economic and demographic change there.
Immigrants don't integrate into Canadian society. This one can be true for some specific groups here and there. Immigrants are definitely more likely to stick to their own ethnic groups, especially within the first few years after immigration. That's when we are at the most vulnerable, so we naturally turn to the familiar language, culture and values in times of stress and adaptation. But as time passes, immigrants are remarkably able to integrate into Canadian society, sometimes even better than Canadian-borns. A survey conducted last year by Stats Canada shows that 2/3 of all immigrants believe they have perception of shared values with the Canadian society. Curiously, only 55% of Canadian-born people reported the same perception. Compared with Canadian-born averages, immigrants consistently had stronger perceptions than Canadians about sharing values on human rights, respect for the law, gender equality, linguistic duality, ethnic and cultural diversity, and respect for indigenous culture. Immigrants volunteer and make donations to meaningful causes on a similar rate as Canadians do. Over the years, immigrants take an active role in their communities and contribute to the social, cultural, and economic fabric of the country. It's important to remember that immigrants are a diverse group, and not all immigrants have the same characteristics, needs, and experiences. Also, it's essential to check facts and not to fall into stereotypes or generalizations when thinking or talking about immigrants or any other group. It also goes a long way to acknowledge the challenges that immigrants face when trying to adjust to a new culture, language, and social system, and to support and help them to integrate into Canadian society.
This is a controversial topic, and I'm sure some of you do not agree with this video. So please share your thoughts in the comment section below. We love reading your opinions and learning about your experience and engaging in discussions. Why do you think that Canada is investing so much in immigration, even though the government is aware of all the problems immigration presents? Is it all for taxes and cheap labor, or is there something else? Thank you for watching. Please share your comments below. We would love to hear what you think. If this video was interesting, please click the like button below and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And a huge shout out to our Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for your support. It means a lot. And with that being said, we will see you in the next video. Take care, guys.